Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it's a review and more of a rant on a film that is such an incredible disappointment, such a waste of talent, such a waste of some genuinely fantastic concepts, some really impressive practical effects and makeup work, and it's a film that easily could have worked or been adequate if certain things were done differently. And that film is Invaders from Mars. There's no place on Earth to hide. Yeah, there's no place on Earth to hide from this crappy, boring, lame remake. Now, this is a film that I have given multiple chances, and each time it has completely blew them. I mean, royally, epically failed. And it's a film that I remember seeing when I was a kid. I had checked it out from the library, and I was disappointed then. And watching it after all these years, my opinions on it have not changed at all. They haven't changed one iota. I still think this is a terrible movie. This is not, absolutely not one of Tobe Hooper's finest hours. And that being said, though, he's done worse than this. And it's hard to believe, but he has done worse. At least his direction in this isn't bad. I don't blame Tobe for this film's failure. I blame the screenplay, I blame the writers, and I blame the decision to cast Hunter Carson as the lead. That's what I blame. But there's other things about it that don't work as well. But I'll get to those soon enough. But anyway, Invaders from Mars is a 1986 sci-fi remake of the 1953 film of the same name. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the original either, so if I had to choose between the two of them, I'd still probably pick this. But that's not saying much, because I don't really care for the original either. This one just has a few more things about it that I liked more than the original. But then again, I haven't seen the original in a long time. So maybe my opinion would change if I revisited that sometime. But I got so many other movies that I'd rather watch before I get around to revisiting or watching and reviewing the original Invaders from Mars. And I know that has the exact same ending as this, so I think the film's going to have some issues with a rewatch just because of that absolutely horrid factor alone. Now, it's directed by Tobe Hooper, who I heard a rumor that he was originally attached to direct Canon's Spider-Man film, which would have been interesting. But then I think one of the producers or somebody was like, hey, I think you would be better for Invaders from Mars. And he signed on to do the remake of Invaders from Mars, this film. Not another remake of Invaders from Mars. This is the only remake of Invaders from Mars that exists. There isn't another one. And you can see why. But he was a big fan of the original. So he was looking forward to doing a kids film because it's something that's out of his wheelhouse. And I gotta say, that it really is not a bad idea to see Tobe Hooper do a kids film, to see what he can do for young adults. But it just, maybe his particular style or maybe the type of film that he likes to make just doesn't really work and mesh with kids entertainment, because I just felt like this film was a missed opportunity. It should have been PG-13 or it should have been R, because that, yeah, it's nice to see Tobe try to get out of his comfort zone, but at the same time, sometimes it's better to do what you know and to do what you know how to do best. And Tobe knows how to do horror best. And I really think this could have been better if it had more horror elements into it and took itself more seriously. But at the same time, still had some fun and some levity. But it had a nice balance of the two. Because there's nothing really that scary or intimidating or at all worrisome about the film. The movie just kind of sits there. The antagonists don't even really feel like much of a threat. The film doesn't really bother to show them as much of a threat. So it just adds, it compounds all of the other problems of the movie, and it's just one of those things where I just wish Tobe did something more like Life Force with this instead of what we got. It's produced by Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus and a few other people. It features a screenplay by Dan O'Bannon and Don Jacoby, as well as some uncredited rewrites from some other writer. The script, to me, is one of the film's biggest failings. I have three main factors I look for when it comes to a movie. And if a film ends up really acing these factors and it gets high scores on all of these factors, then the film is great. It's a great movie. It's a good movie. It doesn't even have to ace all three factors for it to be a good film that I enjoy. The problem with this is it fails all three. So you have the script and the story, which is a really important element for any film, and it's not particularly interesting. It's not engaging in the slightest, and that just really makes the film extremely dull, extremely boring, and extremely hard to sit through. This is a very slow-paced, boring, pathetically paced movie. This film has some of the worst pacing I can think of. For the first hour or so, barely nothing of note happens at all. David sees a spaceship. His parents start acting weird. There's some confrontation with his teacher, who is mind controlled by the Martians. You don't really see the Martians or anything until like after an hour into the movie, or maybe you see brief bits of things, but not much to write home about. Mrs. McKeltch eats a frog, so she eats a frog. His parents are acting weird, and then you get to there's something to do with a drill that just conveniently shows up in the school, and a scene that I agree, my friend Matt did a great job reviewing this, and he made a great point that scene could have been completely cut out of the movie, and I agree. It would have helped the pacing. It just seemed like it was just there to be like, hey, look, there's that prop from the original Invaders from Mars in the school's basement. Remember the original Invaders from Mars? But yeah, and then the military doesn't even get involved until like over an hour into the movie, and the film did a terrible job establishing a threat, so then it doesn't really feel like the stakes are that high, and it's just a very boring, lame movie. It is such a lame-ass film. And talking about it apparently is irritating my fucking eye. It's like my eyes want to just leap out of my skull and just run away. For just sake. But yeah, the script needed a lot of work. It needed to have more action, which would have improved the pacing. It needed to have more character development, and especially for your lead. And you needed to have more for the lead to do. You know, Hunter Carson, he's an atrocious actor, at least in this anyway. I mean, I haven't seen Paris, Texas, but apparently he was really good in that. And Tobe cast him partly because of that, but also because he knew him personally. And he thought he'd be easy to work with, and maybe that is the case, but did he do an audition? Because this kid sucked. He can't even scream properly. He's just going, and he is not really a kid that has that much charisma, so that didn't help. And then there are certain scenes where he just seems like he's woefully inadequate. He's just going through the motions. It sounds and looks like he's reading off a cue card. So, and this is your lead, and this is your protagonist, and he's just weak. is such a weak ass protagonist. He's lame. He's not cool. He's not fun, and that just absolutely kills the film as well. Because this is supposed to be the heart of the movie, and he might as well be just a fucking uh, an inflatable doll, or just a piece of wood walking around, or it's just one of those things where he doesn't add anything to the movie. At best, he's just mediocre, and that isn't even that often. But I also have to say the script didn't do him any favors. The script didn't really do anything to make this kid worthwhile, or to add that much character development. Who he likes pennies. He collects pennies, and he's kind of an outcast. It's really all you get to know about this kid. So, yeah, the script is the numero uno flaw, like the number one flaw when it comes to this movie, and everything just falls apart because of it. If the script was better, the film would have been better, even with the cast that it has. It also has a story, apparently, by Richard Blake and John Tucker Battle. Now, speaking of the cast, Hunter Carson was miscast in the lead role as David Gardner. He's not likable. There's nothing to this kid. And I don't buy, though he's a kid, excuse, because there's a lot of good kid actors, especially in the 80s. I mean, I don't buy that. Look at Andre Gower, who played Sean in the Monster Squad. Like, if he was the lead in this movie would have been much better. And he was acting around this time. So, really, if you had Andre Gower, Sean from the Monster Squad, playing David Gardner, even with the little that he had to work with, he would have made a much better impression on audience members and myself than Hunter Carson did. There's a reason why Hunter Carson didn't really do that much after this, because he just really, there wasn't much to this kid. Andre Gower, would have been nice to see him do more too, and he did a few other things, but the Monster Squad didn't do that well in the box office, and neither did this movie. I mean, this movie cost $7 million and only made $4 million, so it was a pretty big bomb. Critics weren't that fond of it either, understandably so, because it's honestly a pretty crappy film. It's a pretty putrid movie, for the most part, especially because of its weak screenplay and its pathetic pacing. Timothy Bottoms is also in this as George Gardner, David's dad. You have Laraine Newman, who you might be familiar with from SNL. I remember her from SNL. It was fun to see her in a film, and she actually uses her Conan's voice later in the movie, which was fun to hear. And apparently her hair caught on fire when the mind control devices in the back of her neck explode at the end of the movie. So that's unfortunate. But regardless, it's like Timothy Bottoms and Laraine Newman were okay. They did fine with what they were asked to do. They were the kind, loving, stereotypical parents with not much characterization or anything that really makes them unique. Except Laraine Newman was kind of silly, so I guess there's that. And then once they have the mind control devices in the back of their necks, they start acting weird. And that's really it. They do a good job acting weird. Nice job. It isn't particularly that interesting. Or scary. Karen Black, Hunter Carson's mother, plays the kind of the female lead, because she tags along with David throughout the film. And it's hard to believe that they're mother and son, because they have no chemistry with each other in this movie. There's zero chemistry between the two of them. And she just delivers just a performance. There's really not... And it's too bad, because Karen Black is a very talented actress, especially if you see her in films like Trilogy of Terror, where she played a role where she played multiple different people, multiple different characters. So she's a talented actress. It just... Maybe, once again, the script was so poor, she didn't have that much to work with, and pretty much was just relegated to just nothing but average in terms of her performance, because she had a below average, poor script to go off of, to cull from. Now, James Cameron's also in this as a general, and it's fun to see him in a role like this. Out of all the characters in this movie, I would say he's the best character. But he shows up in the film way too late, and there's not a lot of development with him. And I just wish there was more of this character early on, and he had more to do, because he has some of the best lines of dialogue. There's a line where he's talking about how, we're the Marines, son. Don't worry, we don't have any qualms about killing Martians. So I don't think that's exactly the quote, but it's something like that. But so it was fun to see James Cameron as the general. He had worked with Tobe Hooper before, and of course he was in Poltergeist as he was essentially the guy who was running the real estate guy who ran Cuesta Verde Estates in that film. Bud Cort is also in this as a scientist guy named Mark Weinstein. Louise Fletcher, Academy Award-winning actress, is in this as Mrs. McKeltch. And it's just another extension of a bad script. She's just a stereotypical bad teacher. She's not likable, and she's mean, but it just plays across. It comes across as just a average mean teacher stereotype with not much to really differentiate it from all these other movies with these cliched mean teachers. And Louise Fletcher, her performance is okay. It's one of those things where she's the villain technically, because the Supreme Intelligence is just an effect that you see every now and then in the movie, and it's a great looking effect. The makeup effects and the mechanical effects on that were really impressive, but she's the main villain, and it's just not very intimidating. It doesn't come across as a viable threat to me. So, and she gets eaten in a gag in the film anyway. So what was the whole point of that? She comes across as like the villain, and she just gets eaten by these potato head aliens in a very anticlimactic way. It just like she's just been a total joke this whole time. And it just kind of, it pissed me off, because I'm like, you're just wasting my fucking time, and you're wasting Louise Fletcher. You're wasting this Academy Award-winning actress, who, yes, I think she was also in Exorcist 2, if I remember correctly. She's been in her fair share of bad movies, but if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably pick Exorcist 2, The Heretic, over this, because at least I can laugh at that. Because there's a lot of moments in that are so bad that they're funny. There isn't anything like this. Isn't so bad it's funny. It's just so bad at times. It's just boring and forgettable. It's just like, oh god, it's that type of bad where it just irritates you. And so that's the cast. The film features a rather solid score by Christopher Young and an uncredited Sylvester LeVay and David Storrs. Apparently, Christopher Young didn't do most of the score. He only did bits and pieces of it because he was asked to do a sort of experimental kind of weird score in the vein of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but he turned it in, and the producers of Tobe didn't really like it, so they asked him to do something similar to some other movie. I don't know exactly what it was, but maybe kind of Life Force, because the opening credits theme and the main action theme throughout the movie, it has this sort of epic vibe to it, kind of like Henry Mancini's score for Life Force, and it's one of those bright spots. It's one of the few bright spots from this film is the main action theme by Christopher Young. The film's about 100 minutes, and it feels like it's 200 because of the really pathetic, just slow as fucking molasses pacing. And like I said, the movie cost $7 million, and the budget is on the screen when it comes to the effects. I mean, you got effects work by Stan Winston, who apparently was working on Aliens at the same time as this film was shooting, so he ended up not doing that much. Like, he did a lot of the preliminary work, the early stuff, the planning stages, and then Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. and their crew ended up finishing up the aliens and things like that, and features some really nice, wonderful production design. and the look of the alien spacecraft, the interiors is still, it honestly is quite a feat. Not only of engineering but of art design as well, and the design of the drones was inventive and creative, and the makeup effects were fantastic. So, as was the visual effects by John Dykstra. So you had Stan Winston and John Dykstra and these just very talented effects guys who were working on this movie. And easily the best thing about this film is the effects. The effects are the real highlight, but they can't save the movie because everything else around it is so lame. It sucks. So when you have great effects, they can't by themselves end up saving a film that has so many things that just don't work about it. So many failings. And it's frustrating when you see a film like this because you see all these things and all these wonderful works of art and all these just great effects work and all this kind of stuff, and it just feels like it's wasted because it's encapsulated in such an egregiously erroneously bad movie like Invaders from Mars. Now, one more thing I want to mention before I kind of just talk about the Blu-ray real quick and a few other things and then give my sort of final thoughts on the film. I would have to say the cinematography at times, especially on sequences that are shot on the Martian spaceship, that was really well done. The editing is fine by Elaine Jakubowicz. I don't think I said his last name correctly. Especially near the climax, there's some particularly nice editing in that particular sequence. But the script, the story, and the characters are just not up to par, not very good. And then you have, and all of that makes the entertainment factor low. And then you have the just absolutely stupendously fucking terrible ending. It's just shit-tastic ending. It's just a absolute shit show of an ending. It's bad enough that it's anticlimactic because it's like, oh, it's just a dream, and then it's like it's just the double fucking cop out where it's like, oh, it's just a dream, and then no, it isn't. It actually is happening for real, and then I'm just like, that pissed me off so much when I saw this when I was a kid. Like, I hated that ending so fucking much. I mean, I wanted to punch a hole through the TV. I was so pissed. And I rented the movie from the library, so I had to fight back the urge to break the disc because it's a library disc. I borrowed it from the library. I can't just go breaking library discs. So it was rough. Like, so I remember returning it in the slot. I remember just throwing it into the return slot as hard as I could. So I was like, that was my way to kind of stick it to this movie. And since then I'd seen it a couple more times and it was still just as bad as that first time I saw it. And this recent viewing, just as awful, but this time it's in high definition. And admittedly, it does look good. The remastering is quite a sight to see, especially when it comes to the visual and practical effects. And I would say that I'm glad I have this. It was a gift from Jonathan Lindsay, who sent it to me a while back, and I got to give him a shout out. Already did, but thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for this, because I'm glad I have it because not only for the Tobe Hooper collection, but there's some nice stuff. There was a little 30-minute featurette on the making of the movie with interviews with retrospective with interviews with Tobe Hooper, Hunter Carson, Alec Gillis, Gino Crognale, and Christopher Young, and there was some interesting, fun anecdotes and behind-the-scenes stuff on that. The commentary I didn't listen to because I'm not really a commentary guy, but it's got Tobe Hooper, so I mean, if I need some time to kill, I might put that on just to listen to Tobe talk. because he's a very talented director, and from everything I've heard, he was a really nice guy. So it's one of those things where it's a nice way to reminisce about Tobe and his career. And there's a trailer and a TV spot. But my favorite feature is there's a production illustration gallery which is narrated by artist William Stout, and this is some really amazing artwork by William Stout and some nice fun anecdotes about the making of the movie. But what's interesting about this is that it's missing features that were on this DVD or on the separate original DVD release of the film by MGM. The only reason why I still have this is because of Strange Invaders. Also because of the fact that this has features on it that are not on the Blu-ray. This has a sci-fi promo featurette, an original publicity featurette, and I think what these are featurettes that were on a Laserdisc, I think, along with the making of Life Force, although I could be wrong, and maybe there's some rights issues involved with them. But if you are a fan of the film, and even if you're not, like if you can just find the featurettes somewhere, they're worth a watch because there's some nice behind-the-scenes stuff and shows some shots from on the set that are pretty rare and pretty cool to look at. And there's an interesting comparison between this and the original movie, Invaders from Mars, the 1953 film. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say about the film. I think I've said my piece on it. It's one of those movies where there's some good things about it, but there's way more things about it that are bad, which make it a bad film. I know it has a cult following. I don't know why, but that's just my personal opinion. To each their own. It has a fan base, and hey, that's fine. I mean, you're talking to the guy who genuinely enjoys Howard the Duck. So, it's one of those things where teach their own. But this is the nail in the coffin. Like I'm done with this movie. Okay, this is one of those films where I just don't like it, and that's just how it's going to be. I've given it more chances than it deserves, and it blew them right out my ass, along with my dick. But anyway, thanks for watching my review and sort of rant on Invaders from Mars. And as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.